The 1930s was without a doubt one of the most significant and transformative periods for American cinema. It was a decade plagued with political and economic turmoil. The country had been turned upside down by the Great Depression, and before the world had had a chance to fully recover from the fallout of the First World War, a second one was already on the horizon. Classic films like The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind not only provided a whimsically entertaining format for social commentary of the era, but were revolutionary in cultivating the technical and stylistic landscape for generations of films to come. However, some filmmakers of this decade had far bigger concerns than geopolitical uncertainty or economic devastation. Their main concern was your kids getting high. 1936 saw the release of this film entitled Reefer Madness. Originally financed by a church organization, the film was widely distributed throughout the country and was released under several titles such as Tell Your Children, The Burning Question, and Doped Youth. It begins with an ominous foreword which describes marijuana as, quote, public enemy number one. The film tells the story of May and Jack, a couple who sell marijuana out of their apartment. Also part of the gang is Ralph, a college dropout turned dealer, and his trusty sidekick Blanche, both of whom assist Jack in recruiting new customers. One day, the group lures two unsuspecting students, Bill and Jimmy, back to their apartment where they're having one of their special parties. These parties include jazz music, jazz dancing, and, you guessed it, a little bit of jazz cabbage as well. At this party, Jack realizes he's run out of product and convinces Jimmy to drive him to his boss's headquarters to pick up more. Before Jack goes in, Jimmy asks him for a cigarette, and he gives him a joint instead. Jimmy then drives away recklessly and ends up running over a pedestrian who we later find out died from his injuries. Jack agrees not to rat Jimmy out to the authorities as long as he keeps quiet about visiting the apartment, and he successfully manages to keep from getting caught. Later on, Jimmy's sister Mary, who also happens to be Billy's boyfriend, goes to the apartment looking for him and accepts a joint from Ralph, thinking it's a regular cigarette. The two of them get high together, and Ralph eventually starts to put the moves on Mary, which doesn't go his way for long as she ferociously fights off his advances. Bill emerges from the bedroom where he's just had a fling with Blanche. God, why are there so many f***ing characters in this bull? He hallucinates that Mary is willingly offering herself to Ralph and as a result begins to attack him. The brawl ends when Jack knocks Bill unconscious with his gun, which accidentally goes off and kills Mary in the process. Jack then proceeds to place the gun in Bill's hand, framing him for the death of his own girlfriend. He then winds up in court and, after a contentious jury discussion, is found guilty of her murder. Back at the apartment, Ralph continues to smoke his reefer and lament his guilty conscience to Blanche for pinning Mary's murder on Bill. Jack's boss even instructs him to kill Ralph to prevent him from confessing to the murder. As soon as Jack returns to the apartment, Ralph is already suspicious of his intentions and decides to beat him to his own game. Like, literally beat him. To death. Finally, those trusty cops bust in to save the day, and they're all lugged off to the police station where they undergo a merciless interrogation, after which Blanche folds under pressure and exposes Jack as the real killer. Unable to fathom her decisions in life, she then jumps out of a window to her death, and Ralph is sent to the criminal insane asylum. Don't you just love a happy ending? The funny thing is, I could totally see this film being made today, but as a legitimate action thriller movie made purely for entertainment purposes. Right, you've got the young, unwitting students who get tangled up with these drug dealers, and of course, hijinks ensue. Hijinks. Please subscribe. I don't know about you, but to me that plotline sounds like modern day Hollywood gold. You could probably make something similar to this movie in terms of plot today and call it like, I don't know, Pineapple Express 2, and it would pass as at least moderately entertaining comedy. It just goes to show you how much time can change social trends. However, given the context of the time period, the film was obviously pure propaganda designed to stoke fear and unrest, particularly among parents of teenage children. In fact, the opening scene of the film takes place at a high school PTA meeting, where the principal is seen giving a stern lecture to parents about the dangerous devil's lettuce.
The dread marijuana in particular. That is the purpose of this meeting, ladies and gentlemen. To lay the foundation for a nationwide campaign by you to demand by law such compulsory education.
Reefer Madness wasn't the only film of its kind either. Two other notable anti-pop propaganda films were Dwayne Esper's Marijuana, which was released the same year in 1936, as well as Elmer Clifton's Assassin of Youth, released 1 year later in 1937. The film is over an hour long, and because it's now in the public domain and thus no longer subject to copyright, you can actually watch it on Wikipedia for free. And yes, I did watch the entire 68 minutes of this masterpiece in all of its galvanizing glory. Now that's some hard-hitting journalism. Despite the inevitable cringe of this production from a modern perspective, it is important to take into account the cultural context of the time period in which these films were produced, particularly with regard to the sale and distribution of marijuana, or reefer as the film refers to it. Actually, according to the DEA website, there are a variety of aliases used for the drug, such as Aunt Mary, Gangster, and Yerba. And laugh at it all you want, Reefer Madness was instrumental in bringing about legislation that effectively banned marijuana nationwide. 1 year after the film's release, the Commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Harry Anslinger, drafted the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, which placed a tax on the sale of the controversial substance with the goal of eliminating it from circulation. But jazz cabbage, which is the term I'm now using in the hopes that this video has a chance at monetization, has actually been around long before the smear campaigns, controversy, and fear surrounding it. As early as the 1830s, marijuana's medicinal benefits were being investigated by people such as Irish Dr. Sir William Brooke O'Shaughnessy, who determined that cannabis extracts were highly effective in easing symptoms of the disease cholera. By the late 19th century, cannabis extracts were available for purchase in pharmacies and were commonly used to treat things like stomach pain, migraines, insomnia, inflammation, seizures, and a variety of other ailments. Which begs the question, what was the catalyst for all the hysteria and sudden crackdown? Well, many believe it was in part motivated by immigration to the US as a result of the Mexican Revolution in 1910. Author Eric Schlosser says, the prejudices and fears that greeted these peasant immigrants also extended to their traditional means of intoxication, smoking marijuana. Police officers in Texas claimed that marijuana incited violent crimes, aroused a, quote, lust for blood, and gave its users, quote, superhuman strength. Rumors spread that Mexicans were distributing this, quote, killer weed to unsuspecting American schoolchildren. The fear-mongering and politicization of the drug proved to be highly effective. Between 1960 and 1931, a total of 29 states outlawed marijuana. Over the next 4 decades, a number of other laws and punitive measures would be placed on pot usage as well. In 1969, the Marijuana Tax Act was overturned after a Supreme Court opinion declared it unconstitutional, as it required self-incrimination, which was a direct violation of the Fifth Amendment. A year later, in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act was enacted, which branded the drug a Schedule I substance, which is defined by the DEA as, quote, having a high potential for use, no currently accepted medical use and treatment in the United States, and a lack of accepted safety for use under medical supervision. This position of the federal government has remained consistent since the act passed over 50 years ago. Despite the Fed's persistence in denying the reality of marijuana as a legitimate and highly effective medicine, as of October 22, it's recreationally legal in 19 states and medicinally legal in 37 states, as well as 3 territories and the District of Columbia. Legalization aside, the portrayal of marijuana in modern-day movies, television, and pop culture at large has undergone a significant change since the early days of Reefer Madness, undoubtedly for the better. This is evident from a variety of films and TV shows we've seen over the past few decades, such as Pineapple Express, That 70s Show, Weeds, Dazed and Confused, Friday, and comedy duo franchises like Harold and Kumar and Cheech and Chong. And that's just scratching the surface. Even mainstream talk show hosts have publicly dabbled in the forbidden fruit on air. I guess it'd be a forbidden vegetable, technically. Is that right? God bless you, Sergey. And although it may no longer come in the form of full-length feature films, this type of propaganda around Aunt Mary is by no means gone. It's just gotten a tad weirder.
Delilah! Pins down, Delilah. Stoner sloth.
Many of these advertisements have been subject to hilarious trolling by comedians. This is one of my favorite parodies from Family Guy. also think it's fascinating to observe the juxtaposition of these modern-day advertisements against the propaganda films of the 1930s. For instance, in Reefer Madness, the effects of weed are portrayed as causing erratic and hysterical behavior, as well as hallucinations and reckless decisions. In contrast, modern-day anti-weed propaganda portrays marijuana as having a completely different effect than that of the 1930s, namely laziness, fatigue, and depression. Today, the film is considered a cult classic and has spawned a number of adaptations, including a stage play which ran for a year in Chicago, a hit Broadway musical which has run for several years now, and most recently, a 2005 television movie. The American rock band Motley Crue even featured some clips from the film in the music video for their 1994 song, Smoke from the Sky. The original film has even been digitally enhanced and is available for sale on major platforms like Amazon and YouTube. And to think, the filmmakers poured their hearts and soul into this production, intent on scaring a nation into submission, only for their film to ultimately be sucked into the vortex of capitalism and monetized as entertainment and nostalgia from a different time. Now, in honor of this landmark film, I am gonna go sit out back on my deck. It's a beautiful day outside, and I'm gonna enjoy some nice Sinsemilla. Gotta love the DEA.